is as follows. Speak Easy is a diverse and progressive spiritual community sharing a message of love and engaging in conversations that inspire creative expression and spiritual well-being. We honor the Divine Mother and follow the teachings of A Course in Miracles and the principles of love. We see you as a unique expression of love, capable of divine embodiment. Here at Speakeasy, truth is our passion, love is our religion, care is our currency, peace is our goal. We attempt to speak easily about tough and tender topics so that we can navigate life with greater wisdom and grace. We devote this service to the Divine Mother, Mary Magdalene, Jesus, Buddha, and to all the holy names of God, to all saints and enlightened teachers, as well as their teachings, specifically the teachings of A Course in Miracles. We welcome you, and we are so glad you are here. We are a social media friendly community. We invite you to check in on our Facebook platform, share our invites and events, and if you're watching our live stream on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We are a spiritual community with a global message, and we invite you to help share the message. If you received a reminder text today and you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, just copy, paste, and text them the invite. It's easy, and everyone likes to be invited. It's so great to be here with you this morning. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is your second time, welcome back. Our hope is that you make this your spiritual home. Our spiritual community is a place to connect. We love to be able to recognize you by name, so if you're comfortable, please add your name on your Zoom profile. Before we get to the talk and community conversations, Lisa Tolbert will be sharing invitations and announcements, followed by Vince Parker leading us in prayer. And then we have the talk, the community offering, and then the conversation. In this conversation, we encourage you not to leave your brains, your beliefs, or your background at the door. We don't have all the answers, but we love the questions. So now that you have a roadmap about the flow of our gathering, I'll pass to Lisa for our announcements.
Thanks, Jerome. Hi, everybody. Good day. My name is Lisa Tolbert, and I'm a grateful member of the Speakeasy community. We are a virtual community offering daily classes and events on Zoom to support your spiritual journey. Some of the highlights we invite you to participate in this week are tonight and Thursday night at 7:18 Central Time. Gather with us for Sacred Sanctuary, a contemplative practice of prayer and meditation for peace and forgiveness, led by Gigi Laporte. On Wednesdays at 12:30 Central Time, we have a support group called 12 Steps to Miracles. This group is open to anyone struggling with any kind of addictions or friends and family of those who are. We mix the principles of 12 Steps and A Course in Miracles. On Sunday, February 1st at 1 p.m. Central Time, join astrologer Hana Tanajura for a workshop on the astrology of 2026, exploring the energies of the year and how to consciously align with them. More information by following the link. All of our classes and events can be found in our calendar of events. The link will be in the chat. When you see an offering in the calendar that is of interest, click on it to see if class details and registration information, or go to our website, speakeasyspiritual.com. Thanks. It's you, Vince.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Jerome. We thank you all for bringing your energy and love to this service to share in community. We invite you to close your eyes and turn within to the Holy Spirit that lives inside you as we visit a prayer from A Course in Miracles workbook for students, lesson 365. This holy instant would we give to you. Be you in charge, for we would follow you, certain that your direction gives us peace. And if we need a word to help us, you will give it to us. If we need a thought, that you will also give. And if we need but stillness and a tranquil, open mind, these are the gifts we will receive of you. You are in charge by our request, and you will hear and answer us because you speak from God my Father and his Holy Son. Now let's take a moment to let that prayer connect with our hearts. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Vince. That's one of my favorite lessons from the course. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Todd Fink. He is the host of the Kind Mind podcast and co-founder of the Giving Tree brand, a licensed therapist who holds certification in addiction counseling and mindfulness meditation teaching. Todd is our guest speaker once a month, and you can find his bio and ways to connect with him in the chat. And now, without further ado, I'll pass to Todd for our talk.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, friends. It's good to be back with you all. I want to talk a little bit about mental health because it really is such a disturbing epidemic of depression, loneliness, anxiety that doesn't seem to be getting better. And so whenever I can find ways to bring some education and awareness and support to people, I try to integrate that into all my work. Also, a good friend of mine passed away last Thursday. He was a fellow musician from the Illinois River Valley and was always so supportive of not only me and my band's music, but also the mental health work that I was doing. And he leaves behind, I think, a 12 or 13-year-old daughter who's really going to be kind of on her own because her mom had severe mental illness and couldn't take care of her since she was born years ago. So I'm just thinking of him and his daughter and all the other people in this world that are navigating tough lives because of the impact of mental illness. And so today I want to talk about how time, specifically mental time travel, impacts the quality of our minds and our mental experience. And I was referring to mental time travel as important here, which is the uniquely human capacity to mentally, in our heads, I guess you could say, revisit past personal events. That's called retrospection, or conversely, imagine and jump ahead in time to simulate the future events with us in it. That's called prospection, retrospection, and prospection. And it's so much more fantastical than just recalling facts or predicting the future. It's a richly detailed creating of scenarios in the mind, embedded with self-reference and emotions. And it takes so much intelligence from the human brain using memory, imagination, self-projection. It's sometimes referred to as autonoetic consciousness, the sense of a self across time. And this lets us place me in the then, the past, and the later, the future. So in a sense, we're not even moving through time from past, present to future. Time is moving through us in very curious ways. For example, and curious ways compared to other animals. For example, when a predator like a tiger sees the tracks of its prey in the ground, in the sand, in the mud, I don't think that means anything to it. Whereas a human hunter would see the bison tracks, for example, and know it was here about an hour ago. So the tiger needs to actually see or smell or hear its prey in real time to hunt. But this ability for humans led us to the apex of the food chain, not because we could physically outduel a tiger, but because of all the planning we could do. And this is also partly why we're all born so premature relative to our fellow mammals, which can walk around within 2 hours of being born, because our heads are so big as can be, to be accommodated at birth. And then it takes years for our bodies to grow around these big heads to support the brain. Now, mental time travel, remembering and imagining, is how the nervous system predicts danger, how we learn from mistakes, how we build an identity that's so much more complex than probably that of an animal, and how we form meaning, how we sustain hope, and also how we engage with and regulate our emotions. Now, as far as mental health is concerned, so much of human suffering is not caused by the time travel, but by unskilled time travel. And two things to pay close attention to in two of the most common and widespread forms of mental illness. The human mind defaults to two common forms of fixation or overthinking with mental time travel. One is rumination, replaying the past over and over in an obsessive way without integrating it, without learning from it, without simply this isn't reflection, this isn't looking at what happened, this is staring, even against one's will. And then preoccupation, kind of the opposite direction of rumination, and the fixation of worry, simulating the future, but doing so without a sense of agency. It's a sense of helplessness. When memory becomes looping instead of narrative, it cannot really be healing. It actually becomes haunting. Now, that's what we mean when we say that I'm haunted by the past. This is characteristic of depression. And when imagination is mostly for threat projection, instead of planning, instead of directly preparing. We look at the weather app in the morning because we want to prepare. Oh, it's going to rain later, so I'll bring an umbrella, or I won't go to that outdoor event. But when it's only threat projection, it stops being a creative future. It becomes dreadful. And this is a symptom or characteristic of anxiety disorders. So rumination can be thought of as error analysis, obsessing over failure, mistakes that happen to us, harm that happened to us. Preoccupation is threat forecasting, gone off the rails. And so this preoccupation deals mostly with plausibility rather than probability, which means the mind is concerned with, could this happen? Not, is this likely to happen? On an airplane, people get anxiety because it's plausible that the plane could crash and everybody could die, but it's highly unlikely. But that doesn't matter to a person with anxiety. And you can always find something plausibly dangerous if you scan the future enough. Our predecessors would have a lot of anxiety at night. We still get more racing thoughts and anxiety overall at night because that was when humans were the most vulnerable before homes. So you would have to ask yourself, is there enough wood on the fire? Is the weather safe? Do I trust this guy to keep watch first, and so on? And even though we can be in homes and be so relatively safe compared to 99% of history, we still jump ahead until we find something to be insecure about with work or relationships and so on. So that's why this system can overreact and make life hell. Similarly, this is why telling someone with depression, because you can see how stuck somebody or ourselves could be with depression, how stuck we could be in the past. And this is why it's not as simple as saying you got to live in the present. You got to stay present. You got to live in the now and let that stuff go. That often doesn't help because they're not failing to be present. There is an inability to travel forward. Someone with depression can't feel a believable future, or their thoughts about it and themselves in it are so negative. That also contributes to the emotional quicksand of it all, the feeling that their life is playing in slow motion while the world races ahead at 1 or 2x speed. In cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the foremost interventions for these kind of thought disorders or irrational thought patterns, the founder, Aaron Beck, described depression as a cognitive triad, a triangle of negativity, where a person has such negative thoughts about one, the self, the world, their world, not necessarily the whole world, but the world that includes them, and the future. And you have to break one of these points of the triangle to be able to transform the mind under, the spell of depression. And how do I see that meditation then alone doesn't necessarily cure this or cure anxiety? With anxiety, people feel themselves tied to the train tracks of their lives, with a train coming. And so being present in meditation, so present and calmly relaxing on these train tracks, doesn't change the experience of a believed future full of threat as soon as the meditation passes. So as soon as one gets up from their meditation, the same anxiety train is still on its perceived collision course. This is why therapies that do work, like trauma processing, narrative therapy, where a person is guided into retelling and reframing their story, reminiscence therapy, future self-visualization, all this secretly trains the same thing, how to mentally move through time without getting lost. You could think of this as like a time map. And otherwise, people are very lost in the wilderness of the past or the marketplace of the future. This is all about the relationship then of time and time perception and memory and its impact on mental health. So meditation and presence are part of the healing equation, as in this: without any presence, any time travel becomes risky or misguided. But without any time travel, presence also looks like stagnation. In spirituality, we want our identity to loosen up and we want consciousness to expand. Everybody talks about elevating and expanding consciousness. And even when this happens a little bit, something extraordinary happens. The mind, the thoughts, the mind still remembers things, still imagines stuff, but the emotional charge starts to dissipate with spirituality. Why? Because the story is no longer just what does this say about me, but what is unfolding in deep meditation, or psychedelics, or profound love or awe, or other mystical states. People often report that their memories arise, but without shame, or the future still arises, but without dread. And time feels spacious. People with near-death experiences feel like they have this life review all at once, or their whole life is also now, and their experiences feel held. The self becomes a participant in spirituality rather than a combatant or a defendant in time or in the court of the future. People who visit spiritual people or go to monasteries like I have, they marvel at how peaceful those people are, those renunciants or mystics. However, monks and mystics of all kinds are not immune to pain, but they are strangely immune to panic. That's the difference. And there's a paradox here, which I want you to keep in mind. You can't cure rumination or preoccupation by suppressing your thoughts. You have to deal with this by widening the frame in which thoughts occur. We need to let our memory become wisdom. And we need to practice engaging with the future as an invitation. What so many mental disorders have in common is, and this is hard to talk about, I think, because it's so sensitive, but what most have in common is an inflated sense of self-importance. Depression is so often about what happened to me, and anxiety is about what's going to happen to me. We don't always recognize that shame is the other side of arrogance. If we think it's conceited, when someone takes all the credit, when an athlete says, I did it, I hit the game-winning shot because I'm him, or, when someone takes all the credit like this, and we can obviously see they're ignoring the help that they received, and they're buying into the myth of the self-made man, then we should also notice that taking all the blame is just kind of the inverse of this. It's also flawed thinking. And these attitudes in the extreme can be also two sides of narcissism. We have grandiose, the arrogant side, and vulnerable. Everything is so hurtful, so overwhelming, so shaming to someone on that side of the coin. But this is where true spirituality, as opposed to just religious dogma or the lessons in the Course in Miracles that try to clear one's perception and see the big picture. This is where deeper transformation and healing is possible with a system that helps us expand. Interestingly, there's a strong correlation between a sense of spirituality and recovery, but not between one's recovery from any addiction or mental health struggle and a sense of religiosity, like becoming more affiliated with religion or a denomination, I should say. The 12 steps of AA are considered a spiritual program, and for a good reason. They begin with acceptance of our limited nature and the admission that there is a higher power. And I love that they use the term higher power, because even if you don't conceive of a higher power as God, you have to admit that there are powers higher than oneself. Is the earth not a higher power than us? Is nature not more powerful than us? Is a community, is a country, our government not more powerful than us? So then it's about Can we choose one that we would like to connect with? And if that higher power can be divine, you know, then it's more beautiful. And from this, we come to understand that our story is not actually the center of the universe, and that steps end with service to others, which pulls one out from under the weight, the crushing weight, in some people's cases, of our own narrative, aka the story of my life. Now, I know that some of this can sound stigmatizing, and I want this actually to be destigmatizing, and here's why it is. But I know that it sounds like, hey, if you just weren't so self-centered, maybe you wouldn't be so depressed or anxious. But this lesson that I'm getting at really is destigmatizing, because in no way does this mean that the conditions aren't, in most cases, at least to a degree, socially and biologically constructed. Biologically inherited, we inherit traumatic experiences, we inherit genetics, we inherit emotions and the algorithms of survival. And trauma, experiencing events of significant violence or powerlessness, trauma induces shame or hypervigilance or even suicidality. So a victim of sexual abuse or a combat veteran, they don't decide to overreact to things or inflame their amygdala, which is known as hypertrophy in medicine, which can be observed with scans in people with post-traumatic stress disorder. That response is reflexive. So this can facilitate self-acceptance. The thoughts related to these conditions are involuntary. So then, of course, insecurity demands attention. Of course, it seeks external validation. This is how we can see, like, all mental health struggles within the context of time, within the context of family, within the context of culture, within the context of the drama of not their life, the drama of humanity. So no, this is not simply an individual's fault, and yet there's still hope. But one of the most honest premises for your healing of anything, especially with mental health, ought to be this: I may not have caused my problems, but I still have to solve them anyway, because the person that passed on their genes, they can't come back and fine tune them. The person that traumatized us, it's unlikely that they're going to come back and make it right, or volunteer for justice to be served. But in my own spiritual training and discipline and practice, it was never just meditation, even though I did a lot of it. It was that plus service, plus fasting, plus silence, and definitely forgiveness. Those practices together encouraged real transformation and healing in me. And even though I thought I was on the pursuit of enlightenment and motivated to discover spiritual truth, I also found myself slowly disentangling from debilitating anxiety, social anxiety, shyness, self-doubt, relationship anxiety. The people with anxiety have lots of worries. That's the characteristic of it. And even when it looks like someone is worried about someone else, like a boyfriend worried about his girlfriend, it's still about him. He's worried about being cheated on. He's worried about what that would look like to others. He's worried about being judged. He's worried about being rejected. He's worried about being alone. And this is why community, fellowship, activism, all that matters so much, because they expand life again. They restore our circulation with the whole. Isolation is a pattern in depression and anxiety, because one person's preoccupied with a threatening future, so they get stuck. Another person is preoccupied by past failure, so they get stuck. Isolation functions like a tourniquet. It may stop the psychological bleeding, so to speak, after a moral wound. But if you leave it on too long, everything downstream goes numb. It's like sleeping on your arm and then not feeling anything there when you wake up. And spirituality, the totality of it, is the restoration of our circulation with totality. So we feel into our wideness, our greatness, our expansiveness again. And now I want to do a deeper dive into memory. Most people conceive of memory in the brain in terms of recordings, yet it functions as a process and a skill or a strategy that we've evolved with for survival and prediction and meaning making. But I think this recording metaphor, it comes from technology, not our biology or our direct experiences. So cameras, cassettes, videos, hard drives, as these devices became ubiquitous in our lives, it conditioned us at the same time to relate to our own memory as storage, as life events encoded, filed, and replayed in our minds through recall. How many times have you said, I know for a fact this is what happened in an argument, or I know for a fact you said this, or I distinctly remember sending you that email with the details, only to find out we didn't. We were wrong. That didn't happen because the brain didn't evolve to preserve the past for its own sake. Memory is not posterity. It evolved to use the past in service of survival. So biologically, our memory functions as a pattern extraction process. It's asking what mattered before, what was dangerous, what should I watch out for next time? What does this say about how this world works? And neuroscience shows us that memory is a reconstructive process, not a reproductive process. It's not archival. It's context dependent, which means it's not fixed. It's reconstructed according to the new environment, not the past environment, and the needs of the new condition. It's also highly emotional, our memory. Therefore, it can never be neutral or unbiased. It's adaptive. It's not accurate. Let me show you what I mean by this. Can everybody find something to write with, a pen and some scratch paper, or a pencil and some scratch paper? We'll do an experiment together. And if you are able to turn your cameras on for this, I'd like to see a show of hands for certain parts of this experiment, but you don't have to. And if you can't find pen and paper, you can use a note app on your phone, I suppose. I'm going to recite a list of words, and I invite you to simply listen to me recite this list in time, from the first word to the last word. Only when I tell you I'm finished do I want you to take your pen or note app and start writing down whatever your memory returns to you. And it's untimed, so I'm not trying to increase your anxieties here. I'll just wait till everybody's done, give it some time, and then we'll talk about what it means. Okay. No writing yet, just listen. Here we go. Thread, point, sewing, pin, pain, haystack, eye, sharp, syringe, hurt, thimble, knitting, injection, button. That's the last word. I'm done. You can now take your writing device and start writing down whatever comes back to you, whatever you can recall. It doesn't matter the order. You don't have to feel any pressure with time. Just go until nothing's coming back. Anybody need more time? All right. Feel free to continue if you still got some coming. Lisa got 6. Good job. I think 4 or 5 is average. You may have heard of short-term memory recall only being able to get like between 4 and 6 items unless we start using mnemonics, which maybe some of you tried to do. There were 14 words. Raise your hand if you got 14 words. I don't see any hands. Therefore, there is evidence that your memory is not archival. Otherwise, you should have 14 words. So at least short-term memory is not archival. Now the question becomes, which words? Since you didn't remember all 14 words, that means all our memories have prejudice. They discriminate. And for survival, they're going to keep some words at the expense of others. Raise your hand if you got the word thread. All the cameras that I can see, hands are raised. Yeah, you can use the reaction button. Okay, looks like most people got thread. Can somebody unmute and share with us why you think you got thread?
Because it was the first one.
Okay, so it's the first one. However, that means that was the furthest back in time. So that means that should have been harder to remember than button. Raise your hand if you got button. 1, 2, 3. Less than half than those who got thread. So what this means is the primacy effect is stronger than the recency bias. Yes, we can recall the last word, but not as well as we can recall the first word. This busts the idea of a chronological memory. We have evolved for our memories to prioritize what happens first. First impressions matter. This explains relationship woes. People's relationships usually start out very pleasant and loving, and later they might deteriorate, but it's hard to leave for some people because the beginning was good. If the beginning is bad, if the first date's terrible and the second date's terrible, there's probably not a third date. Addiction. The late stages of addiction are extraordinarily painful and debilitating and awful. But the initial experiences with substances are usually quite pleasant and even wonderful. People might remember the first time they got high, the first time they had alcohol with friends at a party. They probably didn't get arrested. I had a friend at one of the first parties he went to, he got arrested. Cops put him in the back of the car and he snuck out of the car and pulled the cuffs off and threw him into a sewer. And then the cops caught back up with him and charged him with obstruction of justice, charged him with a felony eventually because he couldn't reproduce the handcuffs, the federal property in DC. And he ended up in prison for a few weeks and was traumatized there. Needless to say, he could never drink again. He could never be around alcohol because the primacy effect was so awful. However, the recency bias with addiction is people get in trouble, they lose their jobs, but the primacy effect of it was wonderful, it was very self-medicating, overpowers that. Now, the most interesting one, though, please raise your hand if you got needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, raise your hands with the reactions if your camera's not on. Okay, it looks like most people got needle. I would say congratulations, except needle wasn't one of the words. And accepts that. Okay. Barb's nodding. Let's take a moment to process that. Melanie's chuckling. Lisa, you find that humorous too? Any guesses as to why most of us remember something that didn't happen already in this session?
Probably the
Yeah, Ann?
association,
Who
right?
said that?
I did, Jerome.
Jerome. What did you say?
Association, because you said knitting and you said sewing. And so I assumed then when I was making my list that needle had to have been part of it because of,
Well said, Jerome.
yeah.
Ditto.
Yeah, you stitched it together, so to speak. All the words do not have a relationship to sewing. A few do, but all words have a relationship to needle. And this is called the association bias in psychology, which means your brain can plant something that didn't happen into your memory if it serves association and context. And it can feel as a memory. I do this experiment and I'll have subjects tell me, I know for a fact that was the third word. That's why I wrote it down as the third word. And I've also recorded this and then immediately play it back and go, well, then where is it? And it really breaks down or deconstructs people's attachment to their conceptions of memory. Like I said earlier, as an archive. No, it's not an archive. It contains some archives, some recordings. It is a reconstructive process. And so, again, coming back to when I said how people in arguments will say things like, I know for a fact you said this. Maybe it seems like they said that because that's been a pattern in your relationship, or your brain could totally see it that way. So there are heuristics, cognitive shortcuts that inform our memory based on evolution, based on our experiences, and it reshapes time for us, and sometimes to our detriment. And now we have like the direct experience with our short-term memory, not as a chronology of events, but as an emotionally charged and a pattern recognition process. We can come back to this in the conversation shortly, but thanks for playing. What's even weirder, though, is that memory as a capacity is distributed widely across not only our brain, but maybe across the whole organism. There are documented reports of organ transplant recipients experiencing sort of new memories as new preferences, altered emotions, dreams, and personality and behavioral shifts. Most commonly with heart transplants. A friend told me about a case in which a man received a heart transplant and then randomly became interested in swimming and started and took up swimming as a hobby. All the while, unbeknownst to him, the donor was an avid swimmer. So he didn't receive the donor's brain, he received the donor's heart. I want to be cautious, though, in saying that these cases are still mostly clinical anecdotes as opposed to hard, reproducible neuroscience experiments. Yet the pattern is there and it's persistent enough, I think, to talk about. In quantum physics, I do not understand quantum physics, but a system doesn't possess a single definite state. This is what I gather from reading about quantum physics. It doesn't have this definite state prior to a measurement. That's something that was pronounced from the dual slit experiment, or what's known as wave particle duality. And instead, like within an atom, an electron exists as a field of probabilities known as superposition, referring to a potential of outcomes. Only when the measurement occurs does one outcome actualize. And this is presented as a thought experiment with Schrodinger's cat. The cat is both dead and alive until you open the box, whereas a dead or alive cat is in. And so the other states collapse back into possibility before the measurement. Now, once I said that I saw a poetic macro analogy of this with the sun. If you look in the sun's direction, you're pretty sure you see a sphere, a giant sphere in the sky, like a massive photon. But if you don't look at the sun, you still see the sun as imminent light suffused across space. So it's not localized, it's everywhere. Now, when I was thinking about memory and an analogy with quantum physics, I find that memory behaves in an uncannily similar way. Again, this is just poetry, and philosophy. This isn't physics. But when you are not recalling a memory, it doesn't exist, at least not as a concrete object or in a concrete place. It's not anywhere. It exists as latent potential distributed across patterns of neural readiness, emotional valence, your bodily state, and the context of your environment. And when the conditions measure it, as in cues it up as a mood or as a question, then a specific reconstruction appears. In other words, psychologically, this superposed state is something we feel. You know you remember something, but you don't know what you remember until you remember it. I've heard psychologists say that when you remember something, you're actually remembering the last time you remembered it. And I wonder, coming back to technology, if before any of these recording devices existed, before audio files, before videos, before photos even, how did humans feel about memory and time? Maybe there wasn't an obsession with past, present, and future, this neat order of time, because there were no archives like this. I wonder what this could imply about death as well. Does the mind go where your memories are now, superposed? Or are we immortal in a way, like a melody on a piano is immortal, even when you're not playing it? Or paradoxically, or alternatively, are we already dead in another sense? If you were to lose all memory, is that not tantamount to death? If you can't recall the past, who are you? This sense of continuity is all that really matters in the construction of a me, of a self, of an I. If I have no memory, but I'm pretty sure I exist because I'm having an experience. In this instant, I could be a tree or a quasar, but not me, or a me wouldn't matter because meanness is dependent on memory. Even though the word memory is a noun, consider that memory isn't a thing nor a place, but a capacity. A melody doesn't go anywhere when the piano is silent or unplayed. But does it still exist? Or is it simply ceasing to be instantiated? What we fear losing in death is not existence, but narrative coherence, the story of our life. The self depends on memory, but being does not. Therefore, identity is assembled. Awareness is not. Awareness is not made up of parts. When memory collapses, I get that the organism doesn't magically become a tree or a quasar, but it also isn't not them, because those categories only matter to a mind that remembers being someone specific. So this raises the unsettling possibility that we're already dead in some sense. The self we protect so fiercely is never stable, never fully present because of all this mental time travel, always redone or reconstructed after the fact by thoughts about the past. The founding member of the Grateful Dead, Bob Weir, also just passed the other day, last week, I think. I love the Grateful Dead, met some of the members of the Grateful Dead. Bob Weir and Robert Hunter were impressed with our version of Brown Eyed Women, the Giving Tree Band's take on it, featured us, posted about it on their social media. So, brings up a lot of memories with the passing of Bob Weir. And when I think about the band and their name, Grateful Dead, it makes me think that we're already dead, or because we're just merely a flash of existence within eternity, there's nothing to worry about. If we're already dead, paradoxically, we can now live fully and gratefully. The continuity, though, that we rely on to experience life as me, myself, moving through time, is a retrospective dream. It only exists because memory keeps stitching together memories. The I is always late to itself. I'll stop there, pause there, and we can come back to the memory experiment or other parts of this talk in our conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Wow. I'm super excited for the conversation. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. So much food for thought, and the exercise was great. Before we go deeper into the conversation, I'll pass to Lisa Tolbert for our community offering.
Wow, Todd. All I can say is wow. Awesome. The giving statement. Speaky is a non-for-profit virtual spiritual community, and we exist on the generosity of our community members. We thank you for playing your part and for taking the opportunity to make a donation for today's daily bread. Artists and Sunday service, and keep important conversations going. As you were spiritually fed by today's conversation, I invite you to go within and see what is yours to share. No gift is too small. The donation link is in the chat as well as on our website. Thank you.
Lisa? So now it's time for the truly unique experience of Speakeasy Sunday service, our community conversation. This is where we invite you to speak easily, find your voice and your truth, and share your thoughts, inspirations, awareness, and your questions in community. When you feel called to share a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, which is located in the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. Please also note to leave your video on when doing so, as we want to know and see you. And I'll get us started. I have like a million zillion questions and comments. That talk it blew my mind. Like so many things. As a musician, the notion that the music exists immortally and isn't really experienced until it's brought forward by some, and I love that. But as you were speaking about trauma and spirituality is a component of healing trauma, I had a question because I'm a coach, and I have a client that I'm working with. We've been working together for quite some time. Um, she's bipolar and has a number of different diagnoses, and has trauma in her life. And one of the things that comes up in our sessions is her group therapy. So she goes to group, and I just want to just sort of get an understanding of the effectiveness of these things, because one of the things she shares is in group therapy, everyone is sharing their traumas over and over and over again. And the therapist is saying, we're working, when someone else is sharing their trauma, you're working through your trauma. But she comes out of group therapy feeling like she's re-traumatized. And there's a point at which I think it's lacking a spiritual component, maybe. And so I would love to have you speak to the effectiveness of like traditional therapy. Like, I've been lucky. I've had therapists that offered me a spiritual component. They offered me something beyond just talking about the shit over and over and over again. So I would just love to have you reflect on that. So that's my question. Like, how do you find a therapist, or the importance of that? Yeah.
It's a really good question, Jerome. Thank you. And the research shows mixed results with group therapy, especially adolescent group therapy. Not the best outcomes for adolescent group therapy. The value in the group experience, I would say, similar things come up for some of my clients in AA, where they say, when people are talking about their experiences with alcohol, it triggers a craving for me. But the power in the group experience, or the value of the group experience, is that it has a spiritual dimension, in that it at some point reveals to a person that what happened to them, their traumatic experience or addiction, is not as alienating as they once conceived it to be to themselves, or told themselves that it was. And that's about it. I would say that's like the most important lesson in it, is that, or as James Baldwin said, you think your suffering is so profound and so unique, and then you read stories, you read novels, you read biographies, and you realize your trauma is the very thing that like connects you to the revolution, or connects you to the drama of humanity, that makes you like whole, or makes you totally broken open empathically. So those are the things to kind of weigh. Same with like grief and loss support groups. People need them at some points, because it's like you lose someone dear to you, so core and central to who you are, your identity, your path in life, and everybody comes in for like one weekend for the funeral, and then they move on, and it's like, but my body, my heart hasn't even begun to integrate this experience and step into a new one. Then you go to grief and loss group, and it's like, okay, I can kind of be myself. People don't have to, I don't have to hide that or stuff that, so that people don't think I'm weird, or pretend that I'm not hurting the way that I am. So I think all of that applies to everything, where we need to be in subcultures at different times to be able to express ourselves and be authentic, and also tell our story. Because there are some people that will actually re-traumatize someone by telling their story. Here's something that's unique about different kinds of trauma. When people came back from World War II, they were kind of considered heroes. They could retell their stories. So this is a very big difference between that war generation and when people came back from Vietnam. They couldn't tell their stories. When people come back from sexual trauma in the family, can they tell their parents, or do the parents treat them like, because you told your story, now our family will never be the same? Not because you were traumatized and we couldn't protect you. So this question applies actually to every context. And so in that light, sometimes we see the group experience as the very protective conditions that permit healing and transformation to take place. So it's nuance, and there's no one answer. But I hope that helps.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Maureen.
Hi there. Oh my God. Todd,
Hey,
you totally
friend.
blew my mind. I know you just blew all of our minds with that needle trick. Um,
It's a fun one.
and yeah, it's funny, but it's also disturbing. And here's why.
Right? It's
It's
destabilizing.
disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, in our lessons on A Course in Miracles, today's lesson is when I'm not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. And so it's like we have this mass conscious agreement that we could fall into. And what I was thinking was how do we get past that? Because say you were an attorney who was interested in encouraging us to see somebody with a gun in their hand, and you used languaging that could infer this, and then we'd all say, yeah, it was a gun. There was definitely a gun on the list. You know what I'm saying? And so that stays at the level of a thinking that is coercible. And what I would think is it's good to know that. It's really good to know that, because you got to get beneath it almost. You got to get beneath your thinking. You got to get beneath your seeing. You got to get, as Jerome was saying, connected to a truth that is a compass that never fails you. For me, that's the Holy Spirit. But it's pretty interesting. I jumped in the car from this other service I was at, and I just caught the end of it. I just got in right when you were giving the list. And I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm playing this game, but I didn't write it down. I definitely thought there was needle on the list, and I'm very, incorrigible to begin with. So yeah, so I wonder, like, how can we help ourselves and each other to see past these influences so that we can really strengthen a compass of truth?
Thank you, Maureen. And you bring up a really good point about getting out or getting beneath this. What I wanted to show also with that needle is that you're not doing the memory. Nature is memorying. Okay, nature is happening. The needle happened without your conscious choice. Okay, so much of the story of our life is a hallucination. And you're right. Stepping outside of that, through awareness, just witnessing, needle comes up. But when we get enmeshed with the story of our life, when we are so attached to the story, it's sort of like this. Awareness is just observing all of nature, Mother Nature happening without injecting an ego into it. That's not to say it's not that we can't ever do that, or that part of this experiment isn't to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
When someone plays a video game, they play a video game basically because life outside the video game feels a little boring today, and I'd like to go into the video game as an avatar with the capacity to suffer. Mm-hmm. The monsters can kill me. And war is such a common game from Fortnite, Call of Duty, whatever all the kids play. So you have the capacity to be killed. I don't think the soul's journey is too unlike that, which is to say, peace, oneness, unity is fine. But if I could get some action by believing that I'm an individuated self, that's going to be fun and exciting. And yet then we forget. So the other thing is it's like when at the arcade, when you finish a game and you think you earned one more turn, but really the arcade race car thing has gone into the automation mode. but you're still holding the controller and you feel like your movements have synced up with what it's doing. So you think it's live.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the needle is like,
Mm-hmm.
where it felt like we remembered it,
Mm-hmm.
but really we weren't doing it. And
Right.
and then to extrapolate from that, like all the other experiences we have where our ego is interfering, and then being able to like enjoy that, enjoy that ride,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and free ourselves from it when it's time.
Right.
How
Okay.
does that sound?
That so answers my question, because my concern was like, well, my concern is that we have this mass conscious agreement of people who are seeing things, but it's not necessarily the truth, and they're getting tricked into, it's a needle, it's a needle, it's a needle, and then co-signing each other's illusions, in a dangerous way that could cause harm to others. But what you just described to me was that, remember, Maureen, when you got in the car, you weren't, on the precipice of a witch hunt or, the truth. You were just playing a game. Todd was just playing a game with you. And I think that when we
Yeah.
realize that we're not playing a game, when we're actually dealing with reality, I think we do anchor into a little bit more. I'm not sure, but do we not enter into, like, if I was on a jury for somebody's life and an attorney was using words for a gun, like, would I not be able to remember, this isn't a game, this is somebody's life. Like, let me really stay in alignment with what my soul knows to be true here. Sorry to go deep on
Yeah,
you.
well, I think that's a good point, which is like, truth being like an expansive awareness, doesn't mean indifference. It's like that. From that also, there's this, I think, well of compassion, um
Right.
love, and that can guide, how a person wants to participate in the suffering around them, in the care, and also the patience that they have with other people's
Right.
suffering.
Right.
Because if they were impatient, it would mean almost like you're taking their suffering to be something it's not. So that person would still be under some delusions. But the
Yeah.
patience is infinite because the awareness is infinite. Uh,
Yeah.
when a person is kind of stepping outside of this, so it doesn't. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, I think
It's
you make some
fascinating.
good
It's
points there.
fascinating because you're languaging of saying, like, this is a hallucination. Maybe we're already dead, And in the course, it says this is just a dream. So and even in the dream, like, do I take it seriously, or do I play the game? Do I play the game of love?
Right. So the dream analogy is really powerful because it's like the dream character is really scared, is really worried, is really excited, but the dream character isn't really alive. The
Right.
dream character is kind of already dead. It's um, it's a hallucination of the dreamer. So like that, yeah, there's something parallel to our whole life, especially even if we were just thinking materially, which is to say, against the backdrop of the universe, were we ever here? I had a child patient tell me the other day so brilliantly. He said, if you think about it, the universe is billions and billions of years old. This earth is like 4 or 5 billion years old. And we live whatever, number of decades. And he said, if you think about it, no matter who the person is, any point in history, within 200 years, no matter what they did, will not be remembered. It will be gone. It will be erased from memory. And even if it's there somewhere, it won't mean anything. Like who was the president 200 years ago in 1826? So he said, so it's as if you were never here. Now do what you want. That's what the child told me. Not like hurt people, but like now live, now be
Right.
fully alive because
Right.
because it was never started. Um, and with spirituality, with the self and the ego, since the ego is not true. It's maybe real in the sense that it's really experienced, but it's not true in the ultimate sense. In that sense, we're already dead, because that idea has never happened.
Right.
And so the thing that we're really scared about with death isn't the thing that's even real now. And that's what I
Right.
mean by the thing that people are fiercely protecting never was. Therefore, if that's what you care about, well, then we're already dead. And but that's not meant to be morbid. It's kind of meant to be liberatory.
Liberatory,
Thank you.
because me is not that important, but that which is back of me is something that's real. But the me is just a personality that I jumped into for a temporary time. And if I take it seriously, it could be very painful.
I met exactly. I met the spiritual teacher Adi Ashanti once in California randomly. I don't know if any of you know who that is. And he said, it's not important to be important. And that has always stuck with me.
The Holy Spirit says that to me almost every day. Maureen, you're not that important. And every time I laugh and I feel so much better. So it's not a bad thing to remind yourself. I'll pass.
Course in Miracles speaks about specialness, right?
Yeah.
None of us are
Specialness.
special. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's why I
Well,
said the
that's-
two sides of that specialness. When we are in deep shame, it's really saying like there's something special about my hurt that makes it impossible. Maybe other people could experience this, and it's not too unlike the person taking all the credit.
I
Because
think
both require specialness.
And
Thank
I
you.
think that's interesting too, the whole when you think about healing, right? Like people who think their trauma is so great that it can't be healed, to remember we aren't so wounded that we are unable to heal. Like I think sometimes people think, oh, well, the thing that happened to me was so horrible, it's worse than anyone else, and so I'm so uniquely wounded, there's no healing for me. And it keeps us kind of, I think for some people, they can identify with their trauma so deeply that they miss the opportunity for healing because they think it, so.
And good point, Jerome. And nature is naturally healing, rebalancing. That's its nature, cycles.
Yeah.
And that's why the research shows if you go into nature, forest bathing, Shinrin Yoku, being by a river. So what the therapist does isn't, the therapist doesn't heal the patient. The therapist assists and supports the patient or the client in creating the conditions where healing can happen on its own. As in a cast for a broken bone doesn't heal the leg or whatever. It holds back the intrusions on the healing process, which is natural.
Yeah.
Children do this also. Like it's been so wonderful doing child therapy because I can see that if I can hold the space for the child, which is like toys in a playroom that they might not have access to, the child knows what they need to do. They go get the sword, they pretend to kill me, they reclaim their power, and then they heal. And it's like, but that never happens for a lot of children. And so in adulthood, when I'm engaging with people, it's why the inner child work is so important, because it's like, I realize, oh, this wound has never been healed. And yet every child knows what they need to do. They need to be powerful again, or they need me to be in the role of the perpetrator so that they can defeat me and realize that what happened to them doesn't define them. And they do this instinctively. Nobody taught them how to play,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing,
Yeah. So Marianne Williamson, I think, says it brilliantly. She often will say that the psyche or the mind has an immune system, just like the body has an immune system. And I find that really profound to think, that we do have the capacity within us to heal. So Maureen's got her hand raised, and then I think we need to wrap up too. It's like getting to be that time. What a brilliant talk.
Anger is also that immune system. Anger says, get away from me, but a child doesn't have power. So when they say get away from me and an adult hurts them anyway, it creates autoimmune conditions of emotions. And it also correlates with autoimmune conditions in the body. Thyroid disease, the gland in the throat, is highly correlated with patients reporting they didn't feel heard in their families.
Wow.
Hmm.
So you're right.
Well, I think 3 out of my 6 sisters all have thyroid issues. So I wonder, it's only because we were heard, we just weren't heard over each other. A lot of talking. But
Yeah, big families also. Like, I think there's a relationship to thyroid disease
yeah.
and larger families. So just to say that there are layers stacked with what Jerome's saying. There's the cellular level of immunity. There's the emotional level, the cultural level of immunity,
Mhm.
and we're impacted by all of it. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to close with a final question, comment, not sure. First of all, just saying like, well, thank you, Jerome, and thank you, everybody, and thank you, Todd. Like, this was such a wow, I gotta go back and listen to it again. Number one, thank you for that. Number two, thank you for being somebody that children can kill. I wonder how many times you've been murdered.
A
And I really
lot,
appreciate
a
that. Oh,
lot.
God bless you. That's so,
But the thing is, it's like, right, like, are they able to do that, to work out that aggression or that
yes.
fear? And right. So I provide that space with the children that I work with. Like, it's okay to do it here. Before they do that, they test. There's a stage of experiential play therapy where it's like, well, what if I break this? Will I be kicked out of there? And gradually they go, okay, they're not doing this consciously, but gradually they get to a place where they go, I think I can work out my trauma now.
Oh,
And it's
gosh,
hard to
it's
do
so
in other
beautiful.
environments. Yeah, it really is.
I know you just kind of started working with children like in the last couple of years. So I mean, that I know of. Maybe I'm making that story up, but I just think it's gorgeous. I just think it's so gorgeous. And, and in regards to like the getting beneath the memory, I keep seeing this image, and you talked about water, of this wave coming up, and this very temporary time that we are in existence connected to like the idea of just a wave arriving and then falling away. And that everything that happens to the wave during its experience of peaking is like, did a seagull shit on you, or did you fall in love, or did it rain when you arrived, or was it all sunny? And that all of that, the wave could, as we do, identify with the stimuli of when we arrive, when that has nothing to do with who we are. When we go back to the ocean, it's like, I think that we could recall the ocean, like instead of recalling the stories, which I'm a storyteller, I love that, but beyond recalling the stories, recall the source, recall the ocean, because we're all returning there anyhow. And I feel like if I stay in this state of my wave, my peaking and my ascending, or descending rather, it won't be too traumatic if I remember, where I came from and where I'm going. So that's just something that helped my own mind. I wanted to share.
Thanks, Maureen. And I
Mhm.
wanted to add to something that was in the comments too, that this is one of the reasons, what we're talking about today, one of the reasons why losing a loved one to Alzheimer's or dementia at any point is so complex. The grief is so complex because somewhere along the way, the person that you know is no longer there. And that's why memory is so powerful to the sense of identity. If they don't remember you, do I still have, my grandparent? And so the grieving's actually beginning before the the clinical definition of death. So that's that, but that ties back to our sense of who we are. Like, the self or the ego is so much a construction from the stitched together memories and experiences. And yet those, whether we remember them or not, they aren't anywhere now. Um, so anyways, I appreciate this conversation, and all of you being willing to kind of lean into, as Maureen said, this is kind of destabilizing stuff. So I'm sorry if it like shakes the center of gravity for some of us, but I hope you can continue to reflect on these things and see how you might engage differently with what you believe to be the story of your life. When you're practicing your spirituality, if you sit down and you're calm and you're present and you get back up and you go right back to the dread of the future. You go right back to defining yourself as a failure. Well, then it's just, meditation is just a little bit of relief from the crushing weight of the past and the future. So I'm inviting everybody to engage differently with the story of your life and engage differently with presence and awareness and deconstructing illusions. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Todd. And now we'll pass to Vince for our final prayer. And you're muted. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to keep it short and say we give thanks for all that transpired here and the inspiration that Todd has given us to move forward in our day. And so it is. Amen. And thank you very
Amen.
much.
Thank you so much to all of you for being here. We hope to connect with you at one of our events this week, and hopefully we'll see you all back here next Sunday. Blessings on your day.
Thank you. Namaste.